Hello, once again. Welcome back to another episode of the Contrarians. This is going to be another one of our regular type shows of the original concept where one of us on the team has a contrarian choice for favorite album by a band. We've got Tim Durling here, an esteemed guest who's been with us before. And we are going to be talking about the band Poison today. Little bit about Poison. This is a band from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. So this is one of those famous stories like they write about in all their songs about moving out west to the Sunset Strip and seeing if you can make it kind of thing. You know, they talk a lot about this in their music, maybe a little bit too much, I suppose. But anyways, Brett Michaels over there, they had a band called Laser and Spectre, Spectres. Poison was initially called Paris. It was essentially three of the guys and a guitarist, Matt Smith. So they move out west, the apocryphal Go West young man, and Matt Smith decides he wants to bail. He doesn't want to do this thing. So they need a new guitarist, famous story / auditions for the band and doesn't get the gig. CC DeVille gets the gig. They're off and running. They've got a debut album called Look What the Cat Dragged In, produced by Rick Bode, 1986. Once this band gets going, this album goes 3 times platinum. So this is a really big, successful band. They're a band that really was in your face with the hair metalness. Obviously, they're notorious for the really, really looking like good looking gals on the front cover of that debut album. And it's very kind of like, stripped down, distilled, Kiss-like music. It's pretty simple. It's literally the next stage of hair metal. So they caused a lot of excitement with what they were doing. The second album is produced by Tom Werman. Doesn't particularly sound like a Tom Werman album, but it is. Open Up and Say 1988. That thing goes 5 times platinum. Flesh and Blood is, I did an episode of my podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff, called Go to Vancouver and Try Harder, when these bands made the pilgrimage to Vancouver to make a really, really, put a lot of effort into an album. And this is what Poison did with Flesh and Blood. Bruce Fairburn, no longer with us. Mike Fraser, engineering on that one, working at Little Mountain. That's 1990. That thing goes 3 times platinum. They do great with that. 1993, there's a bit of a gap. Well, there's a live album in there. This one here, got a few props for us. What did they call this thing? I always get these words.
Swallow
This Live. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a double clamshell CD live album. They put this thing out. So there's a bit of a break in the studio thing, but they come back. No CC DeVille. They come back with Richie Kotzen and Richie Zito producing for Native Tongue. That thing goes gold. Later on, it gets a little complicated. I recently did an episode of my podcast called Greatest Hits Plus, where I went into the complicated future history of Poison, where you get things like, there's a Greatest Hits album, 86 to 96. That's November 26, 96. That thing goes gold. It's the first compilation. You've got Best of Poison, 20 Years of Rock, Double Dose. Power to the People is June 2000. Where's some of my... So this is where I kind of got more into Poison. It's a bit of a long story that I don't need to go into, but I started interviewing the band a lot and meeting with them backstage and, Molson Amphitheater, all these great packages they were part of live. There's my fully signed Greatest Hits. Interviewed Brett in a hotel room. That was really cool. He was a nice guy. There's your French. I think this is that's my Axe Killer. Open Up and Say the liner notes in here might be mine. I'm not sure. A bunch of the Axe Killers were, but Power to the People was June 2000. That's half live and half new songs. You've got Crack a Smile and More, which is recorded 94, 95. That's delayed because there was a car crash that Brett got into, but that's a Blues Saraceno album. So we've got Native Tongue with an odd guitarist, and we've got Crack a Smile and More, which I really like. So this is the delayed material. It came out March 14th, 2000, but that's your follow-up more or less to Native Tongue. And then you've got an album I thought was pretty good, but it was much maligned. Hollyweird, I thought was a pretty good album that they put out. So I was not a Poison fan during the era. I loved a lot of hair metal, but I drew the line at Poison. I didn't like Cinderella. I hated Bon Jovi. So there's this whole level of this heartland rock. Is Brett John Bon Jovi? Is Brett go so far as to be John Mellencamp? Can anybody buy Brett as Bruce Springsteen? Because in a lot of ways he's kind of the hair metal that thing. He's also the hair metal new country guy. With the hat and with the mushmouth vocals, he sounds like he's from the South. So there was a lot of buying into. You either bought into that image, or not. You bought into the simplicity, or not. You bought into the blues and the new country, and oh my God, am I like a New Jersey kind of guy thing or not? And I mean, it goes even further. It goes into gospel. It goes into acoustic. Do you buy into Poison being the second coming of Aerosmith, or Cinderella? They were both compared that way somewhat, and I guess generally I didn't, but generally later on I was pretty much into Poison. Because I got what they were doing, and I really liked interviewing them and hearing the motivations behind what they were doing. And I like that later music, the dribs and drabs, You Gonna Crack a Smile, and more, and Power to the People, and even Hollyweird. So yeah, I'm a weird Poison fan, kind of the way I'm a late period Who fan, sort of thing. So that's your brief, alternate, strange, slightly weird history of the band. And I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who's going to tell us what his favorite Poison album is and why he thinks this is the best Poison album. But I'm interested first of all to hear what's going on with the Unspooled book, your 8-track book. Where are you at? I understand the Kickstarter is over.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. The Kickstarter closed October 23rd. Very successful, far exceeded our goal that we asked for. So, people have been awesome with stepping up with that. As of right now, we are still taking some last minute. If people are still interested, I've already taken a couple of PayPals, because people can still go on the Kickstarter page for it and view the different packages. Or if they want to know more, if they said, look, I just want a softcover book, or I just want a hardcover book, right. Message me on my Tim's Vinyl Confessions Facebook page. That's probably the easiest thing. Or email timsvinylconfessions@gmail.com. As of right now, we can still get you down for a book and specify if you want to buy a package with your name in the credits and all of that. So we're still processing that. Hope to be getting those orders out. I'm really, you've talked about that feeling of all the books arriving and then having to ship them out. This first time for me. So I'm looking forward to actually seeing the thing in print, and the feedback we've gotten from the folks that have already gotten their PDFs has been really positive. So that's where we're at with that. Still taking some last minute orders if anyone's interested in the Unspooled. And if you've missed the whole thing, if you don't know what the Unspooled book is about, on my YouTube channel, I've got several videos where I'm talking about the whole concept of it. In short, it's about the 8 tracks that were produced way, way later in the 80s than most people might have thought. Cool. Interestingly enough, the band we're going to talk about, for all I know, may have had one. And I say that because Poison's first album was on Enigma Records initially, as was the band Stryper, and their 1986 album, To Hell with the Devil, does exist on 8-track. So who knows? There might be a Look What the Cat Dragged In 8-track out there. I don't think that there is, but who knows? It's very, very possible. Yeah, which is kind of funny to think about.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell us your pick for favorite Poison album, and tell us why.
So Poison, I mean, like you mentioned, Look at the Cat Dragged In. Look how pretty they are. Yeah. It's sort of, when somebody mentioned this, and I don't know if it was one of your books or somebody else's, but someone mentioned that this is kind of an alternate. If you look at the Shout the Devil album cover, this is the light side of that, but the way that the 4 faces are arranged. So, it's funny because I, to paraphrase Dee Snider, I was ground zero for that scene. I mean, Slippery When Wet was my gateway into doing more than just listening to music off the radio. That was all the bands you mentioned, Bon Jovi, Cinderella, that I just totally ate that scene up. Ironically, I wasn't into Poison in their heyday for whatever reason, but like you said with the outset, they were everywhere. You could not avoid them. And I don't know, I just did not get on board with them until probably the mid 90s. And honestly, it was probably when that Greatest Hits came out, because I remember I got that through Columbia House because I needed another selection, and I listened to it. Yeah. And good, solid collection. It's a good car CD. And I realized I like a lot of these songs after all. And then I really started getting interested in what they were doing, because also around that time, this was early file sharing days. And that the Crack a Smile album, like you said, was recorded in 94, 95. It was originally slated to follow up Native Tongue within a couple of years. And it was a combination of Brett's accident. Obviously, that set him back. I mean, he was lucky to survive it, from what I understand. So obviously there could be no tour, but also people have to look back at that time. Poison, I think, did one of the smarter things that the bands of their era did. They did not try to go grunge, because there is not a grunge or alternative album in them. They don't have a slang in them. You know what I mean? They just sat it out. And Capitol Records sat on Crack a Smile and didn't put it out till late 99 or early 2000. So it became that one, and the Kiss Carnival of Souls became these two albums that circulated. And I remember getting a bootleg copy of Crack a Smile, and just the fact that it was something that you weren't supposed to have. And I remember listening to it and quite liking it. Now, that's not my contrarian choice, but to bring it full circle, and I think this probably coincides with your experience. In 99, the original four-piece Poison reunited and started going on all these package tours. I happened to catch one of those after Power to the People came out in 2000. I saw them with Cinderella, Dokken, and Slaughter, which to this day is probably the most fun I've ever had at a concert. That was just an entertaining show. And I remember thinking to myself, because I was such a champion for, a lot of these bands during the 90s, when it was definitely not cool, as their song says, tragically unhip, to support these bands. And I remember looking around, and it was a pretty good size, I think it was an arena that we were in, and it was pretty packed. I remember thinking, okay, it's not just me that still likes this stuff. And just really got behind, kind of what they were doing. As a matter of fact, to this date, the very last concert I've seen pre-pandemic was in September of 2019. It was Bret Michaels' solo band. And ironically, his bass player was Eric Brittingham from Cinderella. So it's fun rock and roll. They're not out to reinvent the wheel. But I will say, and we're getting to my contrarian choice, I really like the point where they got a little, dare I say, smarter. Now, CC is a riot, and CC is Poison's guitar player, really. He's Poison's guitarist. But I like the fact that they've got these two outlier albums, both with a different guitarist, both quite good, and both unique in their own ways. And my contrarian choice for best Poison album is the first of those, 1993's Native Tongues. Very dark album cover. For once, it's not plastered in neon green, because that's their trademark. And so this came out in the spring, I think, February, March of 93. It's dark. They are still using their logo, so they didn't abandon their logo. Of course, this is the only one that Richie Kotzen plays on. And Richie came from that Shrapnel Records stable of, maybe it might not have been Shrapnel, but he came from that Guitar Shredder thing. And he wasn't in Cacophony. That was Jason Becker. Marty Friedman. But I remember seeing ads for his solo albums in Circus and Hit Parader right alongside all of those Cacophony and like the Marty Friedman solo albums and Racer X and all of that stuff. So he came from that. Although he proved to be quite a bit different from that. He's got a great, natural, soulful voice. He's one of those guitar players that doesn't use a pick, and he's got a very unique style. And much later, I really enjoyed the two albums. And I guess there's a third on the way that he did with the Winery Dogs with Billy Sheehan and Mike Portnoy. But the Poison album. So this came out, grunge is, that's the primary rock, and the 80s bands have been, by the press for the most part, swept aside. But as you said, Poison held their own in 1993. They put this album out. It went gold. Might have gone platinum in Canada. I do know this. The first single that they put out was you mentioned Bon Jovi. I think they were trying to do a little bit what Bon Jovi did with Keep the Faith, is like maybe abandon the, I don't know, the more hair metal-y aspects. You know, it can be debated whether they were successful with it, but the first single was this song, Stand, and it peaked at number 50 on Billboard in the States. So it didn't hit the top 40, came halfway up. So obviously a lot of stations were playing it. I think it went all the way to number 15 in Canada. I remember I was in radio broadcasting at that time, and I remember seeing the RPM charts, and it was up there. Like, it was in the top 20 on generally most of the charts all around. There really wasn't a follow-up that did anything close to that. And personnel-wise, there was, the infamous scuffle on the road. Apparently, Richie got involved with Ricky's, I guess, ex-girlfriend, but things got really awkward on the road. It didn't click, and he was out of the band. And by the time 94 rolled around, they had Blues Saraceno, and they were like touring South America. So, but the album itself, I think, is really, really good and really, really strong. And again, I use the word smart. And a lot of fans of the first three albums, which I'm guessing the sober Poison choice would be one of those first three albums, because they all sold so well, especially Open Up. I mean, at 5 million, that's a huge album. Four hit singles off it, one number one song, two top tens. Like, they were a big band. You know, people might like to deride them, but they can't deny the album sales. Those guys sold some records. But Native Tongue comes out. There's a little bit of that Southern, like you said, the new country, even though new country wasn't really a thing at that time. Brett always sort of had a natural twang to his voice. And I don't really think it was noticeable that much on those early Poison albums, unless he was doing a song that was sort of like a faux blues song where he's singing in that lower range and, trying to get all swampy, right? But it really comes to the fore here. It's sort of, Brett wasn't a singer that was overly loaded with range, but what Brett had going for him was personality. You could pick him out quite easily. You could really tell that it was him. And I think he used his range well. He realized that he's not going to be a high tenor singer. Therefore, he really didn't do anything in the studio that he still can't do now. So, whether he's touring with Poison or what he does a lot is tour on his own. Obviously, it's mostly Poison songs. But on this album, it starts off, they're trying to get a little more socially conscious. So they start off with the Scream, which I think has something to do with the LA riots and the Rodney King thing. Certainly that's where Stand came from. And you're right. I mean, no band ever sang more about, hopping on a bus and going to the big city to make it. I mean, Fallen Angel was one of their big singles from Open Up, Say Ah, and that basically, the Fallen Angel could have been the four of them, right? Even though CC they found out there. Richie Kotzen adds a really cool dimension, not only with his guitar playing, with his vocals. The fact that he and Brett will trade off vocals, and technically he's the better singer of the two, but I mean, Brett's the Poison lead singer. It's a little bit, I'm going to use the Bon Jovi comparison. Technically, Richie's a better singer than John, but every once in a while they would let him go up to the microphone back in the day. I just really, really so I dug this album. Like I said, it went over me the first time it came out, but if I listen to it now, I think it stands up just fine. I mean, and they're also doing that sort of grasping for a little bit of more credibility. I think they realize that, like it or not, the grunge thing's here to stay, and people are looking back at, those first few Poison albums. Even though by Flesh and Blood they toned it down quite a bit, they're looking back at those pictures and the videos, and they're saying, well, that's ridiculous, which, differing opinions there. I thought it was fun music. I never saw the problem with fun music, but they're wise to that. So they're doing things like, they've got the late Billy Powell from Lynyrd Skynyrd playing piano on 7 Days Over You. So they're getting they're reaching back into the 70s to saying, hey, these guys think we're all right. It's a pretty lengthy album. It's got 15 songs, really 13, because, Native Tongue is sort of like a tribal intro, and then Richie's acoustic thing is just a little guitar ditty. The rest of them is just it's just a good batch of solid songs. And
let me interject for a second. Let me interject for a second. Yeah, it's 56 minutes long. Flesh and Blood was their first of the CD era. That was 58 minutes long. And then I went and checked. Open Up and Say 36 minutes. The debut, 33 minutes. So they're kind of in the double length zone at this point. So a lot of songs.
Yeah, but they're not. It's funny because they don't seem like really lengthy out. They're not like the late 80s with the CD. I always call it the hot in the shade syndrome, where they're determined to fill up just about every second of space, and they do just that. It's filler. I never thought Flesh and Blood was that long, but I guess there is a lot of bells and whistles on there. The other thing about Flesh and Blood, just quickly, that doesn't sound like a Bruce Fairbairn album to me. That's a really strange production sound for him, and I don't know if that's Ricky, with the drum sound, but it just doesn't have that clarity that the Aerosmith and the Bon Jovi and that stuff had. But
I don't think this one sounds like Richie Zito either.
No, this doesn't sound anything like the Cheap Trick albums. And what's odd is that Richie would work with them again on the studio tracks on Power to the People, which, by the way, if that was a full-length album, I thought that was fantastic. I was so into that when that came out, with the exception of the ballad, The Last Song. That was a little bit rote. But the title song and then CeCe's song on there, I thought those were fantastic songs. And I'm happy to say they did a couple of those live. One of my favorite memories from that is that CeCe, the cleverly titled "I Hate Every Bone in Your Body But Mine." When he would do it in concert, Brett went off stage, so it was just the three of them on stage. Yeah. And right before the guitar solo, CeCe goes up to the mic and goes, "CeCe!" Because Brett would say that at the beginning of most every solo. So it's like he introduced himself. But anyway, this the Richie Kotzen band was documented on this DVD, which came out. Well, my copy came out in 2006. It's just called 7 Days Live, and it's I think this is from it's London, the Hammersmith Apollo, and they do the Scream, Strike Up the Band, Body Talk, Stand, Until You Suffer Some, 7 Days Over You. Like, they do a good chunk of the album, and the older songs don't sound that out of place with Richie there. I mean, but you are missing CeCe and all that personality. But this was one of those albums that ended up in the, I won't say the delete bins, because I don't think it was deleted, but it did end up in the cutout bins within the year. And I think that's just simply a case of they pressed more than it actually sold. But man, I think this album stands up as well as anything. It probably does stand up by modern standards better than the first three, even though it can't compete with the first three in sales and the songs everyone knows from them. I would recommend anybody that either was just a fan of those first three albums, didn't like the more quote unquote serious Poison. It's not that serious. It's by degrees, right? Or someone who dismissed them outright altogether as, I guess you could say you and I both did. Neither of us were into them in their heyday. Go back and listen to this, and there's just some quality on here. Is it, are they the second coming of Aerosmith? No. That's just a bit higher, but I hear where they're aspiring to that on this. And the follow-up album, Crack the Smile, I think is really quite good and different. It's more of lyrically, it's more classic Poison, but musically, again, it's smart. And a lot of that has to do with the guitar player leading the charge. Like I said, I love CeCe, but CeCe's got one lick, I think, that he uses in most of his his solos. Yeah. But it works in that context. But like I said, I'm glad that they have these two Outlier albums. Another thing of interest I brought with me for props is the CD single for Stand. It's got a song on it called Whip Comes Down, which is from those sessions, but it's just a B-side. I can see why they put it on the B-side. It's a little underdeveloped, but it's still kind of a cool thing to have. Most people, Martin, tell me why I'm wrong. I think I already know, but why are people going to say that no, Native Tongue is not the best Poison album? Yeah,
so I've started looking at for various projects, researching for books I'm doing. You could see Spotify plays now per song on a lot of bands, and I'll tell you, this album is just ignored on Spotify. I mean, there are literally 3 songs that are over 1 million plays on Spotify, and everything else is way lower than that. So very ignored. And I didn't check the rest of the albums, but I get the feeling that Poison in general is a little not a Spotify band for whatever reason. But going to, our traditional things of looking, like I've checked a few of the stats. Return of Rock is one that actually had this album pretty high. It had it at number 2 after Flesh and Blood. So that's the first, then Open Up, and then Look What the Cat Dragged In. Rate Your Music put this album number 5, actually. They even snuck Hollyweird in there. But again, it was the debut, all that excitement over the debut into Open Up and Say Flesh and Blood, Hollyweird, and then Native Tongue. They said that Poison's attempt, this is about Native Tongue. Poison's attempt at appealing to music critics had only half worked with Flesh and Blood, so the band go full-on grunge for their follow-up. That's not true at all. 1993's Native Tongue. Poison has evidently ditched most of their party anthems to make a bid for respect. That is true. Again, it's the gospel, it's the blues, it's the Aerosmith, it's the Bon Jovi, it's the Bruce Springsteen, it's the John Mellencamp, all of that. It's the new country, right? Brett's, like I say, his Southern accent, but also there's a little bit of a grunge Jarl in him, just kind of automatically. There's a little bit of the Eddie Vedder, and then when all that music does good, it probably subconsciously gets in even a little more. But let's see, as well as shedding the colors and glam of their appearance in favor of a more caveman-esque, bare bones rock aesthetic. I don't think that's particularly true. I love the production of this album, by the way. I think it sounds great. The drum sound is amazing, and it's challenging too because there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of little ear candy that they put in all over these songs, right? Lead guitarist C.C. DeVille has been replaced by studio whiz Richie Kotzen, whose proficient heavy metal playing puts quite a strain on the light metal of Michaels and Co. Apart from Stand, Poison does not come up with anything as memorable as their previous hits, but Native Tongue stands as one of the most interesting, if not successful, experiments by a glam metal band. 5 out of 10. I don't think it's one of the most interesting. It's still... The things they do on this to try be bluesy and swampy are not, to me, particularly experimental. I think there's many other examples of really masterpiece hair metal albums of trying to do other things. I don't think this is one of them. Best ever albums had it as number 4. Ranker, which is a composite of all rankings, had it as number 4. So again, it was all the first 3. And then whether Flesh and Blood on Ranker had Flesh and Blood number 1. Metal Kingdom also had Flesh and Blood number 1, and then Open, then Look, then Native Tongue is number 4. Interestingly, they had it as the 103rd best album of all of 1993. Live, these songs did not get played live very much, apparently over the years. Stand is only the 25th most played Poison song. The Scream is 34th. 7 Days Over You, we're down to number 50. So this album did not get played live very much at all. So that's kind of basically all I have. It's not that this is a really off choice, but you're right. It's there is that progression, and I think they got to be a better band with Power to the People and Crack a Smile and more. And controversially, Hollyweird, as you can see, some people have Hollyweird in here. Hollyweird reminds me a little bit of Motley Crue, New Tattoo, which I didn't think was a very bad album at all, and that got totally panned, right? So when these bands, and Def Leppard had what is it called? Euphoria, right?
Oh, Euphoria. Yeah.
So there's this creative ethic that takes place with some of these bands where they say we might have wandered, but now we're coming back and we're going to propose to you doing what we did in the old days. And Hollyweird to me sounds a little bit more like that. I don't think it's as experimental. Am I right about that? It's not as experimental as Crack a Smile or Power to the People. Right?
I was actually way disappointed with Hollyweird, especially after those studio tracks on Power to the People. I had high hopes. Yeah. And I remember it came out and I was listening to it and I was like, yeah. But then I was like, they spent like one weekend on this tops. Like the lyrics, well, I'm pretty sure Brett just made the lyrics up. He's quoting himself, which is something that David Coverdale does sometimes, takes old passages of songs when he sings one line and you know exactly what the next line is going to be. Musically, I didn't think it was, there were a few songs that they got right. Like they have that song Home, where they do 2 versions. They have one version with Brett singing, one version with CeCe singing. The lyrics are different. I thought those were kind of fun. Cover Squeeze Box wasn't necessary. The ballads on there, I thought all quite boring. No, Hollywood, and the fact that that's still their going on 20 years, their most recent all new studio album, man, I don't know what happened, because Power to the People it sounded again like they had CC back, but they were still in that smart writing mode. Yep. Another guy that you talk about, the Heartland Rockers, that I hear sometimes come out in Brett, maybe not in the voice, but in the songwriting, is Bob Seger. When I hear a song like, what is the song on Power to the People? I'm going to look at it.
Yeah, I'm not
that
sure.
Strange, Life's a Little Strange. That sounds like a Bob Seger song. That's his Down Home. But Can't Bring Me Down, the title song, Power to the People, that might be the heaviest song they ever did. It's just so cool. Like this, I was on board with this, but then like 2 years later, they come back with Hollyweird with its really bad design.
Bad out. But look at the back. The back is definitely, you could tell that they're on a low budget at this point, right? So, and God love him. I mean, Ricky had his cancer scare too, right?
Yeah.
And he had his drum company, and he's a really interesting guy. He had the drum company, and he was going to, bring I guess it was his son into the business, right? And he had his cancer scare, and and I think there has been some. I can't remember. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this. Is there a little bit of bad blood and fighting in this band? I can't remember. Is there some drama or no?
The fact that Brett has done so many solo tours.
Okay.
And I'm not into any of his solo albums. They all sound the same to me. And he keeps repackaging the same 4 or 5 songs with new songs. He gets other people to come in and play on remakes. And he's doing all these covers. And I'm not into that whole thing. The fact of the matter is, the guy's out there making music. Ricky's got his drum company. CeCe, I have no idea. Bobby Dahl, I have absolutely no idea. I have to think there is a certain amount of tension there. Otherwise, they would be touring as Poison. But Brett just wants to get out and play. And obviously, he does that. He's kept himself in pretty good shape, I think. The biggest mystery I think we all talk about is, what does the top of his head actually look like? He's always got the bandana and the cowboy hat. He's really got into that, If he could rewrite his bio, I think he'd make himself from Texas or Alabama or something like that, not Pennsylvania. But, it works for him. And then, like you said, they started in with comps. This best of ballads and blues, which I'm happy to say does have songs on it from Native Tongue. It's got, what's on here? Until You Suffer Some, Bastard Son of a Thousand Blues, Theater of the Soul. And then, the 20 Years of Rock, whatever. And then so far, the newest thing they put out is this covers album, Poisoned apostrophe D. And actually, no, the newest thing is the CD DVD thing, this live, raw, and uncut, which is actually a pretty good concert. It's got the CD to match with it. But they're one of those bands that I just recently did an episode, which I don't think is played yet, on Aldo Nova. He's one of those guys that I would put Coney Hatch and Vandenberg into that category. I just wish we had more music to talk about. I wish they'd done more music. Cinderella as well. I mean, I have to think it's almost the exact same scenario, that where there's bad blood, because otherwise Tom Kiefer wouldn't be going out as himself. He'd be going out as Cinderella. So there's something behind the scenes, legal stuff. Maybe they're not allowed to use the name. I don't know.
Yeah.
But through it all, with and it's funny you mentioned the dribs and drabs. I mean, if you look at, there's Power to the People with 5 new studio tracks. They did that Swallow This live album with 4 new studio tracks. Like, there's more albums worth of songs they have than they have actual albums. They're just, some of them are just spread out here and there. And, it's another one of those examples where obviously they don't own their masters, so they can't do anything about, EMI putting out all these cheap looking compilations either, with absolutely no incentive for the longtime fan to buy. Like that Double Dose has got absolutely nothing on it that's unreleased. I mean, surely there must be. Actually, back in, I think 2006, Capitol did put remastered versions of the first 3 albums out. And those were actually pretty well done. I mean, they collected some of the B-sides like Gotta Face the Hangman and Living for the Minute, which are perfectly good Poison songs, just kind of put them all in that one place. But when the smoke clears, I think someone could just put Native Tongue on and forget what they think they know about Poison, even though it's undeniably Poison, and go, that's not bad. That's actually quite good. Even someone who's not particularly into that kind of music, it might be one of those cases where they think, I didn't think they had an album like that in them. So I think it's worth revisiting.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below, folks. Obviously, we've got a Patreon situation, so you can support us on Patreon. And we do. Marco's been really good at putting together shows where we look at various things and have these great Saturday night sessions with a bunch of guys. We're going to start reducing them because we're maybe getting a few too many on those shows. But they're some of my favorite times doing this stuff. So yeah, Patreon is there, and let us know in the comments. We love reading the comments, that's for sure. And we'll share this stuff around. But yeah, let us know what you think of this idea of Native Tongue being the best Poison album. Until then, go play some Poison.
That's it, dude.